everybody, so the Diablo 4 patch has a lot of people upset, and I'm here to explain to people why it has a lot of people upset. If you don't play Diablo 4, if you haven't been keeping up with Diablo 4, or even if you do play Diablo 4, I hope that I can explain what's going on that has so many people angry, with my friend, the handy dandy notepad, where I took notes. So instead of going through all these changes and talking about all this, I just wrote down what has most people upset, and I'll show you what exactly I mean here. The amount of damage that you do has overall been reduced. That's basically just true. They nerfed a lot of meta builds. They nerfed a lot of ways to magnify damage. There were some stealth changes, although I don't really hold stealth changes against a company. With patches this big, there are some things that are bound to not be properly, let's say, put into the data, put into the patch notes, recorded, if you will. So sometimes stealth nerfs are done intentionally, but not all the time, okay? The amount of damage reduction you can get has also been reduced. This means that basically you do less damage, you take more damage. Vulnerability was nerfed hard. Most people agree this is a good thing. Basically, you could put a debuff on the enemies that made them vulnerable. The unfortunate part was vulnerable ended up being a huge source of damage, and not having vulnerable basically made you non-viable, or at the very least not top tier. And the problem was that not every class, not every spec within a class could get the vulnerable debuff, and it went from being kind of like a cool debuff that some specs could do to being something that every spec had to do. So most people do agree the vulnerability nerfed hard is a good thing. Leveling got nerfed pretty hard, and I'll show later on why this has become such a big issue. Hell tides now take longer. Hell tides are, I'm going to be blunt, not really that fun to begin with. They're effectively enemies spawn, and they spawn at a higher level, and they're tougher, and you need to farm them, and then you open a chest. They made the amount of like farming you need to do before you can open the chest take longer. So most people agree that that's not good. No design problems in the game were addressed, and the lack of content was not really addressed either. So if I look at Druid here, and I'm just going to use Druid as like a kind of like a snapshot of what's happening here. You can see one of the big issues here, and actually I should have wrote this down. I don't know why I did it. Very few, if any, builds were buffed. So instead of there being excitement over trying new builds, all they really did was nerf some stuff, and that was basically it. We can see here on Druid, there's a nerf here. There's a slight buff on the claw. There's a nerf on ability, slight damage on an ability, slight buff 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 on vulnerable, but vulnerable's been nerfed really hard. Slight buff, actually this one was a pretty big nerf. Here's a slight buff. Overall, realistically, when you're looking through these, you're probably seeing that none of this is really that big a deal. And yeah, this is the entirety for a class. These are all their changes. That's a change to every single skill in this class. As a seasoned starter patch, this is every change that was done for that class. And I'm sure most of you can agree, those of you who even played the game can agree, this is really not that much. And really the biggest change here is Storm Strike went from 25% damage reduction to 15%. That's a large amount of damage reduction that was removed. Now, I could be wrong here. I think a lot of people could be wrong here as to what they're doing, but it seems what they're trying to do is to try to force people to play at lower levels. What does that mean, lower levels? Well, you know, I'll launch Diablo 4 here, and it's probably going to lag, but the issue is the design problems were not addressed, and the lack of content was also not addressed. Now, this game might lag me because, let's be honest, this game sometimes has a few issues, really. So let me go into Diablo 4, and let's talk about what this season didn't do. Once you beat the campaign, you have World Tier 3 and World Tier 4. What does that mean, World Tier 3 and World Tier 4? Well, that's literally it. Difficulties. You go to difficulty 3, then you go to difficulty 4. Why would you do that? To be honest, I think a lot of people are wondering, why would you do that? So, let me go back to the capital, because that's where I know where everything is. So the problem is, once you beat world tier, I'm just gonna mute the game here real quick so you guys can hear me over the game. Okay, once you beat the campaign, generally speaking, you go from world tier 1 to world tier 2 to world tier 3 to world tier 4. And I'm just gonna quick go up here and show you that. So at world tier 3, that's difficulty 3, you can now get sacred items. At world tier 4, you can now get ancestral items. What does that mean, realistically speaking? Well, I think people are used into ARPGs that the higher level you get, the better your gear is. And that's mostly true in this game, but the amount that your gear gets better is really insignificant. Basically, what you do is you play World Tier 3 until you beat the boss of World Tier 3, and then you do World Tier 4, at which point you're basically done with the game. All you do at this point is continue to farm dungeons using these Nightmare Sigils. So you press this Nightmare Sigil, it adds these affixes to a dungeon, and then you clear the dungeon, and that's it. Then you get gear from it, and the tier controls what level the enemies are. So effectively, they want you to do lower level dungeons than you were used to doing by nerfing characters across the board, but also by nerfing the amount and speed at which you level. The question is, why? You can see here in my inventory that I have an ancestral mace. The required level on this item does not always correlate, not really that well, to how strong it is. Even the item power on the item doesn't really correlate to how strong it is. Items instead comes in tiers. The best way to describe it is there's item tiers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc., etc., etc. The problem is, and I can try to explain this for people to understand, knowing everything I just said, the problem is World Tier 3 and World Tier 4 don't really add that many item tiers. You need to level up a lot in order to get the actual tiers of the items that drop to go up. There's not that many of them, and you need to level a lot to get to the next tier. And even once you get to the next tier, the amount that they're better is, I mean, to be frank, practically insignificant. So I would have to sit here and I would have to level over and over and over in order to get a better weapon. Leveling that's now slower by clearing dungeons. Now, the problem is there's a fun boss at the end of World Tier 3, and there's a questionably fun boss into World Tier 4, and that's it. That is literally all the content so far as bosses and things like that are concerned. Now, I'm sure some of you might say, but in Diablo 2, this is Diablo 2. Okay, I know I keep making this joke. Diablo 2 is so old, it graduated from high school, went to college, graduated from college, and got a job working a 9 to 5. Diablo 2 is old. We should not be comparing games like this to Diablo 2. I know you might say, but Diablo 3. I don't care about Diablo 3. I do not care about Diablo 3. I care about if a game is fun for me now. Grinding levels to get to one higher item tier, because remember, this might as well say item tier 5. In order for me to grind to find an item tier 6 item, I would need to sit here and level for hours and hours and hours. And maybe once I got level 70, I don't know the exact levels, I'm sure someone has it, I'm just using theoreticals here. Maybe once I got level 70, I could start getting higher item level items. To be blunt, that doesn't sound fun. Does that sound fun to you, to sit here and grind dungeons? These dungeons are not very fun. It's basically run up, kill enemies, do weird objective, end dungeon. Then you go back, you get another Nightmare Sigil, you compare affixes, you see, is this one doable? Is this one not doable? Then you do another dungeon. There's not that many packs of enemies. They tend to not really be that different or interesting to fight. They tend to not have very many different abilities. The bosses at the end of them, if there are bosses at the end of these dungeons, tend to not be very interesting either. And so basically what everyone has noticed is this game kind of sucks. And I'm sorry if that sounds mean, but once you're done with the campaign, a lot of people expected there, because, all these news publications, sorry if you disagree with me, but I hate you. Sorry if you disagree with me, but all these news publications and Blizzard themselves alluded to the idea that this would compete with Lost Ark, that we would have unique dungeons, that we would have new bosses to fight. But all we get are the same dungeons, and the dungeons aren't unique. They aren't crafted. There's no packs of enemies that are different. The mob types are the same ones we've done in the campaign. Everything is the same. Everything is similar. That's it. That's all you do. So effectively, once you beat World Tier 1 and World Tier 2 and you've done the campaign, and I will admit the campaign is decent. With the campaign, it would be a solid 7 out of 10 game, right? But that's the thing. I would give it a solid 7 out of 10, followed by an end game that I feel, and a lot of people feel, misled and lied to about. Because I'll be blunt, and I'm sure many of you would agree, it's just not fun to just grind Nightmare Dungeons to level up and, oh, you can get a higher tier item. But here's the thing, it's the same item I have, it just rolled slightly higher stats. That's not fun. That's not interesting. So let me close this here for a second. What seems to be the point of making damage reduced, damage you take increased, hardener, but most people agree this is better, leveling taking harder, and hell tides taking longer? What seems to be the point? The point seems to be to make you sit at levels for longer, to drag out the content and make it seem like there's longer of it. Basically to stall the player out, to delay the player, hoping that people don't notice, wow, I'm really not increasing my gear. The items don't seem to be getting any better, and I'm actually quite bored right now. Because to be honest, that seems to be it. A lot of people are quite bored. I got bored. You can see my character's got level 60. I got bored and quit. Got another character level 61, got bored and quit. And that's it. That's the game. That's a $70 game. I agree the campaign is decent, but it truly feels like they quickly touched up the campaign, released the game, promised this huge, expansive end game full of, they're gonna add all this new content to the game. It's gonna be so cool. It's gonna be so fun. They promised us that, okay? And what did we get? Seriously, what actually did we get? Can someone actually tell me what we got? Because to me, it seems like all they do is rehash again. There's maybe, I would take gander a guess here, there's maybe 10 different packs of enemies. So we're killing the same enemies. We're killing demons or bandits or, God, some of them are like the snakes or the paladins, and that's it. You kill the same packs of enemies, you get random dungeons, you do the dungeon, haha, that's like, if this sounds really dumb and you're not really understanding and you're confused, dungeons aren't like World of Warcraft dungeons. They're not like MMO dungeons. It's basically just a randomly generated place with randomly packs of enemies, and you clear it, and then and that's it. That's literally it. If the combat was really fun or the loop was fun, maybe this could be a thing. But to be blunt, to be frank with you right now, if the goal was to make it kind of like a weird roguelike, I could get behind that. Diablo the roguelike, okay, I could get behind that. But that's not what we're going for. We're going for an end game. This is the end game. The end game is doing these random dungeons. And all the nerfs seem to be to stop people from getting too high level, to stop people from getting to too high item level stuff, and to stop them from noticing this kind of sucks and really isn't that interesting. And with the item cap and the item thresholds, because again, you might see item level and you might see required level, but really it's just tier of item, tier 2, 3, 4, 5, and the tiers at the high levels dry up very quickly, especially because the uniques, the legendaries, they are the same thing, and you're going for the same gear with maybe a slightly higher stat. If you level up 10 times, you could maybe find the same legendary with slightly higher stats, and that's it. And that's boring. Everyone hates it. That's all I have to say. So why is everyone annoyed at this patch? No design problems were addressed, the lack of content was really not addressed, and few, if any, builds were buffed. So even if you did enjoy the game, the same content is here, the same content is viable, nothing has changed, there's no new builds that seemingly are actually going to come out of this. And that's it. That's the new season. This is what they promised you. $70 game right here. Live content. You bought this $70 game being promised. All the news publications got together, and I truly do believe that there was some collaboration between Blizzard and these news organizations, because we all got pitched the same idea that this is the best late game. This is the best end game we've ever seen in a Diablo product. And I assure you, yeah, honestly, for a Diablo product, it might be the best end game, but it sucks and it's not fun. That's it. End of video. So thank you for watching to my rant here. If you agree, if you disagree, leave a comment, leave a like if you watched all the way through, or even if you watched it all. So thank you all. Thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.